you are going to love today because we're going to learn all about acrylic painting landscapes, and something we don't talk about enough. And we've got a terrific acrylic painter with us today, Charlie Easton. Welcome, Charlie.
Thanks very much, Eric.
Now, tell us about where you are.
Well, I'm up in Vancouver, Canada, just a few miles over the border, but yeah, a bit of a different scenery up here right now, where the snow is starting to fall. The coast mountains are looking really, they're looking pretty beautiful. I'm looking forward to getting back up there and painting in the snow.
A lot of inspiration up there.
Oh, hugely. Not just from the incredible scenery that we have, but I think there's also some wonderful artists that have been painting here historically, for certainly the last 100 years. We talked just off air about the group of 7 artists that really haven't traveled far outside Canada, that making inroads a little bit into the UK. And I know Steve Martin, the comedian, did a big show down in LA of Lauren Harris's work, but just some beautiful work from back in the 1920s through to the 1950s. I'd encourage everyone to check it out.
Oh yeah, it's fabulous work. I've got I don't know if I've got all the books, but I've got lots of books on the group of 7. And for anybody who is not aware of the group of 7 and the artists within the group of 7, absolutely will blow you away. Certainly doesn't get enough attention in America. That reminds me, we should be doing an article. I'll get that moving forward. But there's even a little intrigue, maybe even a possible murder from what I understand.
Wow, yeah, no, that was not, so that was Tom Thompson, who was one of the contemporaries. He didn't quite, they hadn't made the group of 7 yet, but yeah, definitely some intrigue.
Oh, I thought Tom Thompson had been part of the group of 7. I guess I missed that. I guess I need to know more about it.
Well, yeah, you know what, I should look up on it as well.
Yeah, well, we're probably both a little right, and maybe I'm a little bit more wrong. Anyway, what are you going to do for us today, Charlie?
Well, today, Eric, I thought I would try and show everyone the benefits of acrylic painting, not just for acrylic artists, but also for oil painters as well. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show the importance, in particular in a mountain scene, of shadow pattern, and how actually, you can get a lot done in acrylic very quickly. And then if you want to refine and build off that great base, you can do so in oil. So hopefully the oil painters among us, of which I know that you have a number tuning in, you can still take something out of this in order to advance your oil painting practice. But if you're an acrylic painter, hopefully you'll also be able to see the benefits of using lots of paint, getting things done quickly, and how that benefits your studio practice and also your outdoor painting practice.
I think it's an absolute must to do. First off, a lot of painters are looking for alternatives for when they're on the road. Secondly, I like to do underpaintings, and I often do my underpaintings in acrylic when I'm on location, because then, I've got a dry underpainting and I can lay things on top of it without waiting for it to dry. The one I'm working on behind me, which is this one here. Is I'm using oil, and quite frankly, I'm waiting for it to dry so that I can lay things over it. And so I lose 2 or 3 days in some cases waiting for it to dry. So I'm anxious to hear this, and I appreciate you being on today. We're going to bring you right back after I make a couple of brief announcements. Charlie, you have a lot of very strong opinions about marketing and advertising for artists. Do you want to touch on those at all?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of imperative for artists right now to find new ways to reach their audiences. And one of the things I've been looking into, along with one of my my key galleries, mountain galleries, which are based up here in Canada in Banff, Jasper, and Whistler, we've been looking into things like virtual galleries in order to get people into that make them feel like they're in an in-person experience.
Yes.
Because these days we're not having the contact that we used to, and we're not having the ability to see art in a great location. If you don't mind, I'm just going to share my screen here. This is the Moving Landscapes exhibition that I've just been putting together with with the mountain galleries is you can see this is an online 3-dimensional space that we've built so that you can go and check out artwork. You can zoom in, find out more about art. There's a whole load of rich video content. And this is all at mountaingalleries.com/moving landscapes, or you can just find it at my website. But I just think it's really important, to your point, Eric, to invest in this side of your art in order to say, you know what, my work is important. I've put in a huge amount of energy into the development of it, and now let's get it out there.
Well, one of the things that we fight constantly, I fight might be a strong word, but I teach marketing at our annual plein air convention, our annual figurative art convention. I have videos, I have training. I'm developing a course. And the one thing that happens frequently is artists have this thought. It's kind of like the movie Field of Dreams. You know, if you build it, they will come. And I know many, many brilliant artists who have never sold a painting, or sold very little, or don't sell much at all, because they have this sense that it's crass to put themselves out there. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think, Eric, it's really important to almost have a bit of a split personality on this. When you're painting, I genuinely believe the most important thing is to fall in love with the process. You've got to get involved with it, especially when you're outside painting, because you're going to get your butt kicked. Let's be honest. There are very few painters in this world who can go out and do a Sargent or do a Sorolla and say, I'm just going to create this perfect vision that's going to be exactly what I was intending. Right. So I think you've got to fall in love with the process of getting outside, being blown around, the light changing, your paint pot falling over. You've got to fall in love with that, so that you can almost remove yourself from the product. But at the end of the day, you then have to put on your other hat and say, well, how am I going to sell it? Because otherwise I'm not paying the mortgage, and I'm also not going to be able to invest as much time as I want in the practice of painting. So it is a bit of a split screen on this.
Well, the reality is
equally important.
The reality is that in anything you do, we all have to develop muscles in certain areas. You know, just for instance, if you're an artist and you have to do your taxes every year, you have to develop muscles in doing your taxes every year, or balancing your checkbook. You know, if you're a parent, you have to develop muscles in parenting or dealing with schoolwork. And so marketing is just another muscle you have to develop.
Yeah.
And if every artist would spend 1 day a week, or 20% of their weekday time focusing on marketing, I've trained many, many people, and if they just do that one thing, it'll almost double their sales overnight, just because they're paying attention to it. Otherwise, you know, I go to artists' websites, they haven't updated their website in 3 years or 5 years, and it's something that's critical. It should be updated, you know, weekly, if not. And by the way, the Google algorithms will punish you if you haven't put new content on your website every week.
And I'll just add to that, just last thing on that, is that when you've got when you're a gallery artist like I am as well, you know, I think it's important to have your own Instagram channels and feeds, so that you can have that, you can provide content and a direct conversation about what inspires you and what you're doing. But also, when you're producing content regularly, when you are up to speed, when you're creating good inventory management systems and all the rest of that for an artist, that helps your relationship with galleries. Absolutely. And that is absolutely critical, because if you can help them sell more of your work, you know, when a painting sells, guess whose work they're going to put it back up on the wall? They're going to put the person who's making their life easier and who's also investing in their practice to get better. So I think it's really, really important to have both of those sides to your character, the art developmental side. And certainly I've benefited from a lot of the videos that you put out on your site, learning and investing time on the development of my art practice. And similarly, on the other side with the marketing, you got to invest in that too.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to put you on camera so you can kind of jump into it. If you can get your camera a little closer to that canvas, that would be terrific, because I know people will make comments about that.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I can't really go too much closer to that. We got the top and the bottom of the panel there.
All right, that works.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
And I've got my reference photo up here. I'm going to take all of you guys up to the Coast Mountain Range. This is a place called Elfin Lakes, which is a beautiful place up near in between Whistler and Vancouver. And I'm just in love with the place, and it's a great place to paint. And what I was going to show today is a little bit about my acrylic setup, because some of that might be alien to you guys, and then also how to develop a shadow pattern when you're starting to paint something like this, which can almost immediately tell a story about form in an environment, in a landscape, because ultimately what we're trying to do as artists is a magic trick. We're trying to create we're trying to turn a three-dimensional space, the landscape within which you are painting, into a two-dimensional painting. So you're trying to take something that is inherently has form, that you can move around and see different shapes and different angles, and turn it into something that still tells the same story. So that's what I'm going to try and do today, Eric.
Excellent. Okay, Charlie, I'm looking forward to it.
Okay.
I'm going to ask everybody, by the way, in the comments, if you have questions, I'll pass them on. And if you are an acrylic artist or you're interested in learning more about acrylic, say so in the comments. I'd be curious.
Yeah, I'll take any questions. What I'm going to do just very quickly at the beginning, Eric, is just to show you how I set up my paints, because I think a lot of acrylic artists will have a little bag of tubes and they'll just squeeze little dobs out on their palette, and you know, pick tiny amounts of paint. I do something completely different, and I've actually borrowed this or amended a technique that I learned from Marsha Burt, who is somebody I consider an absolute mentor to me, who I think is the finest acrylic artist around at the moment. And she's painting out of Santa Barbara. And she taught me to use lots and lots of paint. So I have these little boxes, which are they
vitamin boxes?
I just got them from the dollar store. And so all of these have got huge scoops of paint that are already ready to go. And the thing is, with acrylic paint, you'll notice when you go into the art store, it's cheaper than oil paint. And that's because it's got less pigment per cubic inch, and it's got more binder. And so if you want to create the same effects, same juiciness, the same richness of color in acrylic as you do in oil, you've got to use tons of paint. And it's also, that's where you start to get a bit more fluidity. And you'll see this when I demo. I'm using lots and lots of paint in a way that actually allows for wet in wet blending. If you're just working, using tiny amounts of paint on a very porous canvas, of course, all of the liquid is going to get sucked out straight away. And then you're going to find it very dry and not ideal to paint with. So
how do you keep the paint from drying out in those little boxes?
I have my trusty spray, which I'll spray both the surface of the painting and I will spray the little boxes. And so, those boxes have got very deep troughs to them. And what that means is that you've got a very small surface area to volume ratio. So even though you've got a lot of paint there, the surface area compared to the depth of it actually is quite low. And so when I spray this just on the top, all I got to worry about is keeping the top layer a little bit damp, and then everything below is going to stay nice and wet. And I think it's really important to do that.
Yeah, and it just develops a little skin. If you have to, you can just pull that little skin off.
Exactly. And then once in a while, for sure, the box will end up being all gummed up and I'll have to, start again. But yeah, I find buying acrylic paint in bulk and then scooping out, making sure that you've got tons of it on hand, it gets away from that fact where you start to get a little cheap and go, oh, I don't want to put any more cadmium orange in there because that tube cost me a lot of money. Well,
right.
Just get it out there and do it. Ultimately, you're better off doing a better painting.
All right, terrific. Hello to Brazil. I have somebody watching from Brazil.
Hello, Brazil.
All right.
So yeah, the other thing I would just say is about acrylic paint is that often because you're using these paints that dry fast, there's a tendency in acrylic painting that I've seen to have really bright, smash mouth paintings. And I believe that actually setting up your palette so that you have a few colors on the opposite side of the color wheel allows you to actually get some nice muted colors. And so
what you can see your palette?
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll just show on this board here
the color combinations that I use. So what I'll have is I've got my cadmium orange that I then will mute with that's an ultramarine blue. So that's one little, I think of these colors in terms of, opposites, and or not necessarily diametrically opposite on the color spectrum, but really importantly, this mutes this and this mutes this.
Right.
And so I think of that as a pairing. I think of another pairing being that's a Hansa yellow, and then that is paired up against a dioxazine violet, which is a very, very strong color.
Right.
Now, and then I'll look at another pairing, which will be quinacridone magenta, and I'll pair that up against a phthalo green. Now, if you put in the middle of these, now I won't go to this length right now, but I would encourage all of you who want to try and get a bit more familiar with color mixing to do this yourself. When you start mixing the two in a kind of an equal measure, you start to get some really nice muted colors. You mix that with white, and you start to get some really interesting grays. And that, for me, when you've got these very high pigment strength colors, these are all single pigment colors, you can start to actually get some really interesting grays in acrylic using just a few different color combos. So this is something that I would encourage people to do. You can start to see the different colors that you can get by just using two opposing colors and your and white. So you'll see as I build using these acrylics, I will get some very interesting grays, and that is something that isn't typically associated with acrylic work.
Right.
So these grays here are typically where I'll build most of my painting, but then I'll still have the ability to hit with some more of this pure color.
All right, good.
So I just wanted to share that with you first.
Well, I think that's a unique way of looking at it. A lot of us look at that from the standpoint of opposites for the, for the graying down of things, but are you actually laying out your palette so it's opposites right there on the palette?
Yeah, generally I'll have my warms and my cools that will be opposite each other. But I will always, it seems, go back to these color combinations that will then gray. And as I said, if you go to the trouble of figuring out the different stops between these two, you'll see that there's a huge richness of color.
Yes.
And a lot of the power painters up here in Canada really, in my opinion, have found their way by nailing the grays.
Well, I think that's true here too. It's just that once you get to a level of pro, most of those people are really focusing on, they make their paintings very gray. That way, when you put color on it, it really sings. But everybody says, "Oh, what a colorful painting!"
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So anyway, I just wanted to show that because I think that's important. You'll notice that because I'm not going to be able to talk about through this demo, which I believe is just going to be half an hour. I'm not going to be able to go into all of my color mixing choices. But if you see something up on here, I will have. Let's say I'm going to be using an ultramarine blue. I'll typically be just taking the edge off it by using a little bit of the cadmium orange. Or if I've got something up here which is quite light, maybe quite yellow, then if I wanted to mute that, I'll mute it using the dioxazine violet. And similarly across the magenta to the phthalo.
And are you using any kind of an acrylic medium at all, or just straight water?
I don't. I put some on here because what I did is I toned this canvas for two reasons. Firstly, to make it a bit easier for you to see so that the camera doesn't expose for the white, but also to tone the canvas so that I've got a little bit of warmth on here. And then I'm going to start going in with a shadow pattern, which is going to be in the blue, and you're going to be able to see the difference between the warm background and the blue of the shadow. So I did put some medium in here, but I don't put any medium in the rest of my paint. I generally just mix with a little bit of water.
Okay.
So I'm going to launch in. Basically, the painting that I'm going to try and do is based off this. I say based off this. When it comes to painting, I think it's really important to say, what's the impression, what's the feeling that I'm getting from a place. this particular location at this time of day, I love the way that the light streaks in and sort of catches the tops and the highlighted areas of the peaks and the trees, and creates this sort of this glow that's emanating from the right-hand side and dragging across. I also love the way that the mountains feel a lot bigger than this photo is suggesting. So those are the two aspects that I'm going to pull into this painting. And yeah, I'm going to try and convey that through shadow pattern very quickly. You can probably just see in the corner here, I have the same painting up on my screen that I have in the studio, so I'll be working on that as well. But I thought I'd put that there for you guys.
All right, great. Thank you. Well, you better get started.
Yeah, I better get started.
Run out of time.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm just going to mix up a little bit of a mid-tone blue that's had a little bit of the edge taken off of it using the cadmium in order to have something to put down to mix my shadow pattern. And you're hopefully going to see very quickly that the form of the place comes out. Now, I do sometimes sketch onto the canvas to start with, but I'm not going to this time because I'm going to really be laying in just simply large shapes, just wetting the surface there and wetting my paints. And what I'm going to try and do is get this, the light streaming in across the forms. So my shadow pattern, you can probably see on my canvas, on my palette that I'm mixing here, I've got tons of paint that I've just been able to grab very quickly because everything's available to me. So everything in these blue areas is going to be in shade. And as I said at the beginning, Eric, this can be done as the basis of an oil painting, and it can be done as the basis of an acrylic painting or a sketch in the field. You know, I find by using this technique of getting in your shadows in acrylic quickly, you're able to actually see how the painting is going to end up quite quickly. So I'm going to cut off really a little bit of this, squash it a bit, so my trees are going to come up on an angle through here.
So do you try to connect all your darks?
Yeah, I'm actually going to, because I'm going to want to paint a little bit wet and wet, I'm going to mainly focus on the upper section of the painting to start with. Because acrylic, obviously, you know, it is one of the big frustrations of acrylic is that you don't have much wet and wet time. And so, yeah, I'm not necessarily focusing on that, but I will connect the darks eventually. So that's starting to show the shadow pattern that's going through this piece. And I'm not going to worry too much about the horizon or the line at the top of the painting, because I'm going to cut it out in using the sky to reveal the space. Now, so we've got the warms and cools there. I might as well go down a little bit further just so that you can see the continuation of the shadow pattern. But if this is going to be the left-hand side of my tree that comes in, I'm just use a slightly darker just to separate it, slightly darker shadow. And then I'm going to have some rocks that are going to come through here, and the light is going to stream through. So I'm going to continue on in the shade further up, just putting a couple more soft, dark areas into to create a bit more form. Still working purely within the shadow area. Now, one of the things that you'll notice, anyone watching, if you go onto my website, charlieeaston.com and check out some of my art. You know, I paint in quite a fast, loose style, and it's something that I think actually, for me anyway, tells the story of these environments. Whenever I'm out and about, I kind of tend to anthropomorphize an environment and almost say, oh, what does this look like? And I definitely get this from my mother. She's an artist herself, and she'll be constantly, you know, she'll be visiting a place and she'll go, oh, look at that, it looks like a herd of elephants sort of moving across the air, the landscape. And I don't think that's a bad thing, because I think that sort of directional quality that you get when you say, oh, I think that looks like something else, actually really benefits you. It allows you to paint it in a different way. So here, as I'm seeing the mountains sort of pushing up to the sky, all of my brush strokes are pulling in a similar kind of direction.
Right.
I'm now going to start putting in the some more of the highlights. You can see you've got shadow pattern here, you got darks, you got the blues, and then you got the warms, which has been revealed by the ground that I had on there in kind of the orange. And you can start to see already how the mountains are starting to create a form. So I'm now going to start working on the transition between that light and the shade, just so that in the areas that I want there to be softness, I'm allowed to do that by the paint still having a little bit of wetness to it. So I'm just basically, I'm working within the same color system here. I'm mainly using ultramarine and orange. I'm in this zone here, but I'm also mixing in just a bit more white in there. So as you can see, as I put this down, I've still got a little bit of fluidity in that paint that I put down. So I'm still getting some happy accidents, but it's just not, it's not going to quite the same level as you would get it in oil, and it's not going into a swimming pool, which is obviously one of the challenges that you have painting in oil, especially in a more humid environment. Like, you know, I recognize where we are here on the coast in Vancouver and in Canada, where it's a little bit cooler in general. We have more drying time on a lot of these things. And Eric, I was gutted when I was supposed to be teaching at the plein air convention this year down in Denver, but then when you moved it to Santa Fe, I did wonder. I was like, I wonder how my paints are going to do down in Santa Fe.
You're going to dry out fast.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Well,
So
we'll
anyway,
have you back. We'll have you back.
Well, I look forward to that whenever it happens. So anyway, I've now just worked a little bit on the transition between the light and the shade. And now when you see that I'm going to put in some of the lights, I can use a different brush, pick up a lot more pure light color, maybe a little bit of the white with a bit of the Hansa yellow, which is going to start telling the story of some of these highlights up here. You're going to see that I'm going to get some of the form, which I've already sort of detailed in my shadow pattern, is going to start to really come to life. And this is exactly the same way that I paint when I'm out on site. You know, bold, big brush strokes. I rarely use anything less than an inch wide brush. And the shadow pattern that I'm describing here is starting to make sense. It's starting to show the form of the mountains.
You got about 50, let's see, 40, 50, about 15 minutes.
Oh, that's plenty of time.
Yeah,
how long do you get outside in nature normally?
Yeah, no, the faster you paint, the higher the lower, let's see, the higher your hourly rate. Yes.
Yeah, the reality is on that one, Eric, though, is I paint a lot, but I have tons and tons of paintings here in the studio that are waiting for the next step, the next level.
Yeah.
And I think that's okay. You know, I'm okay with the fact that I need to
to paint fast when I'm outside, and not every time it's not going to work absolutely perfectly every time.
No, nobody does.
Yeah.
So I think the one thing to point out is how you're carving out as you paint those edges.
Yeah, yeah, and I really enjoy this particular brush. This is an inch wide. It's actually an angled brush. So that the angular nature of that brush allows me to carve, I think, quite nicely. Now, I don't want this sky to be super saturated, so I've just muted the blue so that I'm able to get a little bit more gray in the sky, so that your eye is going down into some of the hotter color lower down.
Yes.
And that's one of the story. Go on.
Somebody was asking if you do plein air. I said, yes, you do plein air.
Yeah, I paint plein air all the time. And if you go onto either my Instagram or Facebook channel or on the website under the videos header, you will see a lot of the videos that I take when I'm out. I take a drone with me often, get some interesting footage using that. And yeah, it's plein air. The practice of plein air painting is very dear to me. It's what keeps me going, really, and it allows me to feel, you know, more connected to these environments that I then am painting back in the studio in larger works. Yes, it's just critical to one's practice. So I'm now going to start within that shadow pattern that I've got there. I'm going to put in some of the snow in shadow and the snow in light, and I'm keeping an eye on time. I'm just going to try and get the large shapes in. And I'm never worried about the odd splash or dribble of paint. People pay extra for that.
Do you find you succeed more when you use bigger brushes?
All the time, and it's the number one get out of jail for me. If something's going wrong, more paint, bigger brushes. That's typically the way to get around any of your issues. Is just go back to your original concept and start using those bigger brushes again. And I can't stress it enough. I think that one of people's real problems with acrylic is that they're not using enough paint. So let's just. So
do you just have a pegboard on your easel, just on a regular easel?
Yeah, and the reason I do that is if I'm using a big painting, it doesn't really matter. It can still lead against the easel. But if I'm painting smaller, I can then just, you know, put little hooks into the pegboard, and then it will hold it.
I see. Okay, cool.
Just for purposes of seeing how the lower area is going to work, I'm not going to be able to finish everything. But then when I get it, I'll just rough in a little bit of the higher chroma, lighter sort of light streaks that are coming down through this foreground area. If the foreground is less important to me, the light is more important. So I'm using the form as the basis for that light narrative.
Explain that again. If the foreground is less important, the light is more important. I would think that if you want to draw the eye to something, you put more light on it. But why would it be the opposite? So
what I'm saying is that the whole concept of the painting is the light pushing in from the left to the right. What it hits, it's not about those objects. It's not about the trees. It's not about the rocks. So it's more about getting the directional element than it is about crafting the perfect tree.
Okay.
So I find that, you know, more and more people are taking better and better photographs. And so we're, as artists, the important thing for me is to document where I've been, the feeling that place has given me, and then that narrative that I develop is absolutely unarguable. If I'm able to say, you know, it's not about a rock. You all know what a rock looks like, but man, wasn't there this incredible scene when, you know, the haze came up behind the trees. The trees were, you know, were feeling like rocket ships. They didn't necessarily look like trees anymore. There was more of an ethereal quality. I find that's where you're unable to do that in photography anywhere near as easily. So I'm a big believer in the impressionist nature of art. You'll notice as well, just talking technically here, this piece of the shadow pattern has already dried. So if I want to try and create a little bit of a haze, as I was just mentioning there's a little sort of atmospheric haze behind these trees. I can now go over it and scumble with either a dry brush or a glaze and create a bit of drama going on in that space, detailing the fact that in this area the light isn't hitting.
This looks like fun.
You know what? I would encourage everyone to get out and use the acrylic paints. I've seen a bit of a resurgence in gouache painting, and obviously there's a number of fantastic gouache painters out there. But I would also encourage you to get out with your acrylics and just, you know, excuse my French, but just stop. Well, I won't say it, but just stop moaning about the fact that the paint dries quickly, because it does. Yes, you're absolutely right. It dries quicker than oil. But that can be a real benefit as well as the hindrance that you're seeing it as.
Which is why we started adding acrylic to the plein air convention, because it's really critical to make sure that we've covered that as well, because so many people do it.
Yeah.
Like you've got somebody watching from Russia, from France, from, let's see here, Brazil, Germany.
Very good.
Of course, I don't mean to slight the people who are watching from the U.S., of course.
Yeah, no,
it's a lot of Canadians tuning in.
Oh, very good.
Oh, well, Canada.
Yeah, go Canada. That's right. Yeah, I mean, there are some wonderful acrylic artists up here, and actually, you know, just talking about Canadian art in general, I mentioned it at the top of the show that the group of 7, but there really are many other people following in the same tradition as the group of 7, getting outside to paint and seeing these environments that are just undeniably just so impressive. They just, you know, reach out and grab you and make you go for your paintbrushes.
Yeah, we have a lot of Canadians who come to the plein air convention.
Yeah, I know a few of them have been down.
Yeah,
this is you know, this is a long way from a finished studio painting, but you're starting to see, I believe, how I'm creating form within this space using the medium of acrylic to start, you know, building those blocks, building those large shapes. And if you were to now say, I'm now going to go in with oil, you could absolutely do that and start creating a bit more form on some of these boulders.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, fabulous.
So I'm happy to keep going and just
you've got about 4.5 minutes.
Okay.
So keep going. Everybody wants you to keep going.
All right, I'll do that.
Yeah. You're a hit. You're very popular. Everybody's loving it.
That's why I do it.
The manufacturers are going to be loving you, because everybody will go out and buy some acrylic paints now to try it.
Oh yes, that's right. Well, you know, I'm always looking for endorsements. Basically, anything for free paint. Yeah, it's you know, it's wonderful having a community of artists up here that have been very supportive. And if any of those guys are tuning in, thank you for doing that. It's a real privilege, not as an original Canadian, as somebody that's moved here. I feel, you know, that the pride of being a new Canadian is, I think, it's not necessarily stronger, but it's different to being the pride of being you know, somebody born and bred.
Well, you picked it. That's a good thing. You picked it.
So anyway, I'm just going to go back with one last
little pass on the bright hits. Just
yeah, I'll tell you what. Let's make it fast, and then you can do a quick studio tour.
Yeah, no problem.
All right.
So this is just some of the hits coming in here. Nothing but the hits.
Playing the hits.
That's right. Anyway, there you go. There's a quick sketch, and that could have been done outside and would provide a huge amount of information for a larger piece at a later date.
Outstanding. So when you paint in studio, do you typically keep it as loose as you would outside?
Yeah. This is a painting that I'm working on right now. Let me just unplug. This is a painting that I've been working on. You know, again, similarly loose, using those muted colors. And yeah, this is the studio. It is right now, you know, just stacked full of paintings.
I like the racks.
Oh yeah, the racks are good. There you go. There's my makeshift tripod that I was just using for the.
I love it.
This, but yeah, and then this is the messy side of the studio. That's got
all right.
Like,
we don't care.
All the rest of that.
That doesn't bother any of us. We all live that way.
Yeah, you know.
All right. Well, Charlie Easton, thank you so much for being on today. I want to remind everybody that you can find him at charlieeaston.com. Let me pull it up real quickly. And his virtual is charlieeaston.com/virtual if you're interested in his virtual art gallery. Yeah. Charlie, thank you. This has been a pleasure. You've got us all inspired.
Well, that's what you do, isn't it, Eric? You inspire people. I'm proud to be a part of it. It's I've followed along with a lot of the Plein Air magazine or the Streamline work for a number of years, so I'm honored to be invited to be a part of this, and yeah, hopefully not the last time.
Well, absolutely not. We'll have you back we'll have you at the Plein Air convention, and then of course we'll have you back at some point as well. We're doing this every day at 12 noon, so we got a lot of time to fill.
So yeah, well there you go. Maybe next time we'll do one outside.
Oh yeah, well that sounds like a good idea. I think that would be very popular. Charlie, thank you so much.
No problem.